So in this short video today, I'm going to talk to you about supply chain resilience and its impact on contracting issues in the manufacturing sector. Before we dive into that, I think it's worth exploring what supply chain resilience is and why it's important to you as a business. Supply chain resilience is a term that gets used a lot. You can find lots out there about it, but it's often misunderstood as to what it actually means. At its core, it is about the ability of your supply chain to be prepared for and respond to unexpected risk events. We've seen this very prevalently around at the moment with recent issues. You can see with the shortage of HGV drivers, the fuel shortages, but you can also go back to the last 18 months where we've had a global pandemic, and even before that with Brexit as well. There's been lots of unexpected risk events that have had an effect on the supply chain of manufacturing businesses. So why is the resilience of your supply chain important? Well, it's because it goes to the root of your business. It affects the ability of you to obtain the goods and services that you need to obtain in order to operate as a business and to grow as a business. So with that context, what are the key contracting issues? There are so many that I could talk about here, but I'm just going to stick with 3 today that I think are really important for you to focus on. Firstly, exclusivity and volume commitments. It's really, really important for a manufacturing business to have that continuity of supply, that certainty of supply. But at the same time, if we're giving too much of that away in the form of exclusivity and volume commitments, how much are we putting all of our eggs in one basket where if that supplier has an issue, we don't have any other alternative? That can really prod and test the supply chain resilience. And the ideal balance is having that balance of flexibility as against the certainty of supply. The second issue, which I've had come across my desk a lot in the last 18 months, is to do with force majeure material adverse change clauses, and how actually they are really, really useful clauses, and clauses which actually do matter. They're not just a boilerplate clause. And I think something that is key about this is to view a force majeure and a material adverse change clause as an exclusion or limitation of liability clause, because that is what it's doing. It's not just sat there as something to skip over. It is a situation in which your supplier can be absolved of any and all liability for failing to deliver what they've promised to deliver. So view it in that context. But beyond that, we need to consider that actually it can also be helped by having really good business continuity procedures in place outside of the contract, but then including within the contract appropriate provisions to maintain that business continuity plan, to discuss that business continuity plan, so that we're actually having input on our supply chain and how it can manage risk. Thirdly and finally, another provision that often gets overlooked in a contract, which I think is invaluable in these situations, contract management provisions. They're often dismissed as administrative provisions that don't really matter. They're skipped over in a similar way to notices provisions. They can actually be really helpful in this situation. I'm constantly talking to clients about making sure, well, what happens if this happens? What are we going to do if we have an issue in this area? Having a really clear process in the contract that sets out who's going to be involved, how we're going to decide what happens, and what ultimately gets done about it can save a lot of time in negotiations, in disputes, or even just in something new has arisen when we need to deal with it and it's not been dealt with in the contract. These 3 principles, I think, can be really helpful in making sure that your contracts provide for a more resilient supply chain. I hope that's been helpful. If you want to find out anything more, please go to our microsite, factoryofthefuture.co.uk.